Imagine you're reading news about AI or watching a YouTube tutorial or sitting in a team meeting and someone drops phrases like we should use an LLM with reg, or the model hallucinated, or let's fine-tune the model. Let's create an AI agent for that task. Everyone nods, you also nod, but internally you have no idea what they are talking about. And it's not because you are smart and just don't understand complex things, it's just nobody actually explained these terms in plain, understandable language. And other people who are nodding probably also don't really understand what they're talking about and what these concepts mean. So today, let's actually fix that. There is no PhD required here, no special technical skills, just 10 minutes of things explained simply. Let's start with machine learning. So AI did not start with ChatGPT. It started with a simple idea, which was, what if instead of writing rules, we let the computer figure out the rules itself? And that's what machine learning is. So classical programming of computers looked like this. You write rules or instructions and computer follows them. Machine learning is completely different. You give computer examples and computer finds the patterns just by looking and analyzing the examples. So for example, you show it 10,000 photos of cats and 10,000 photos of dogs, and it figures out on its own what makes a cat, what patterns and characteristics, and what differentiates it from the dog. You never wrote a single rule or instruction for it to follow. It figured out or learned things from pattern recognition. That's the core idea of machine learning. Now, next question is, how does the computer just figure out patterns? So what does that even mean? It does it through something called a neural network, which was loosely inspired by how our human brains work. So think of it like this. You have a bunch of tiny decision makers in your brain called neurons that are organized in layers. So data goes in one end, then each layer transforms the data a little bit, and out the other end comes an answer. And the magic here is in training. So you run millions of examples through it, compare the output to the correct answer, and nudge the network to do better each time. And if you do that enough times, the network gets really, really good by this continuous learning loop. And a neural network trained on a massive amount of text data is called an LLM, or large language model. And this is basically what ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini are. And what did these neural networks like ChatGPT or Claude learn to do? They're good at one thing, which is predicting the next word. That's literally it. For example, think of a sentence like, the capital of France is blank, right? Which is Paris. But when you train something on basically the entire internet and then push it to do this billions of times, something really interesting happens. It starts to understand language, context, the reasoning, and in many cases even code that is available out there in the internet. But not because someone programmed it to do so, but because it saw so many examples that it learned the patterns underneath. So now computer understands the context and human reasoning around ideas. And that's exactly why ChatGPT felt so magical at the beginning, because it almost felt like it could think like a human. Now here's what's interesting. LLMs don't read words. They read tokens. So a token, you can think of it like a chunk of text. Sometimes it's a word, sometimes it's part of a word. So for example, business might be one token. A word like operations might be split into two tokens. Now, why does this matter to you? Because every model has a limit on how many tokens it can process at once. And that is called a context window. And that's why when you paste a huge document into ChatGPT as a prompt, it sometimes misses stuff from the beginning because it ran out of window. It can only take in or read so much because it has a limited context or set of tokens. So you can think of the context window like a short-term memory. Whatever fits in the window, the model sees and uses to base its answer on. Whatever is outside the context just gets ignored. Now here is another interesting but very underrated concept. When AI works with text, it converts words into numbers, specifically into lists of numbers, which are also called vectors. These are called vector embeddings, which are vector representations of text. And here's the cool part and why this matters. Because unlike traditional databases where you look up a word by finding all the matches of that exact word in the database, embeddings or vector databases, the words with similar meanings get similar numbers or vector representations. That means dog and puppy, for example, end up close together in this number space, or business and marketing end up close together. Hiring and recruiting also end up close together because they're close by meaning, even though these are two separate words. And this is exactly how AI understands the meaning, not just exact words and phrases. And it's also why modern search is getting smarter. Instead of matching the words you typed in, which was a traditional search, it finds things that mean the same thing, or that are close in meaning to whatever you searched, even if you didn't search for them exactly in those words or phrases. Now, talking about search or asking AI things, we call that prompting an AI. So a prompt is simply an input that you give to an AI model to make it do something, like give you a reply. So when you type something like, explain how AI works to me like I'm 5 years old, and you type that into ChatGPT, that's your prompt. But here is what most people do not realize when they're using ChatGPT. The quality of the output depends massively on the quality of the input or the prompt. So if you write a lazy prompt, a vague one, without any context, you will get a very generic answer. But a very specific, well-structured prompt will return something which is super specific and useful for you. So to give you an example, fix my marketing message is gonna give you a very generic, mediocre output. However, if you tell AI, here's my offer, this is the value it delivers for this specific target group, and this is how I try to communicate the offer to this group per email. However, currently I'm getting a conversion rate of 0.3%, and I really want to increase that to 2%. So tell me what's wrong with my messaging and how to fix it. Give me an improved message, highlight the changes you make, and explain the reasoning behind each change. But before, if you need any additional information in order to give me the best possible answer, then please ask me questions to get that information from me. Now that prompt is way, way better and will give you 100 times better and more accurate and specific answer, which is essentially how you want to leverage AI. And this is also why prompt engineering concept became a thing. And it's not as fancy as it sounds, actually. It's literally just learning how to communicate your thoughts clearly to an AI model so that you get the best possible answer from it, which basically means knowing what context to give, how to frame or formulate your question, and what output format you want to get back. So do you want it as a PDF? Do you want it as a document? Do you want it as a text? Do you want it as a bullet point list? So basically, you can mold the AI to give you different quality of answers depending on how you prompt it. Now, LLMs know a lot, but they only know what they were trained on, which is public internet data. But they don't know about your internal documents, your company policies, your business decisions from last 4 quarters, your personal preferences or your team structure, and so on. All of this data or information is not available to ChatGPT or other LLMs. However, in many cases, you would want the replies to be based on this additional information that is specific to you or your company. And that's exactly where the concept of RAG comes in, which stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation. Again, a fancy name for a very simple concept. The idea is this: before the model answers, you first retrieve relevant information from your own documents, which are not public information, but company internal or your personal stuff, and then inject that information into the prompt as additional context or knowledge. So instead of, hey AI, what does our customer onboarding look like? The AI will get a prompt that says, hey AI, here is our customer onboarding workflow. This is exactly the details. Now answer this question based on this information. So very important to understand, the model did not learn your documents during training. It just reads them in the moment, in real time, like an employee, for example, would read a document that was handed to them right before a meeting to read it and prepare for the meeting. So RAG gives the model additional context in real time. However, we also have what's called fine-tuning, which is different because it actually changes the model. So, for example, imagine you take a general purpose LLM, like the ones that are behind ChatGPT or Claude, and you train it further on thousands of examples from your specific domain. For example, you train it on medical records or legal contracts or security reports. So the model doesn't just read the data like in RAG. It learns from the data and internalizes that knowledge, so it doesn't need to reference external information like with RAG. So it adjusts the information internally, and now it speaks your domain language natively. So think of it like difference between handing a consultant a briefing document before a meeting, which is going to be RAG, versus hiring someone who spent 3 years working in your industry, which will be fine-tuning. Both are very useful, but they solve different problems. Now, AI is impressive, but it has this big weakness that frustrates many people, including me, which is what's called hallucination. Very simply explained, it means AI just makes up stuff that are not factually true. And this is important to understand, especially if you're using AI in a professional context where the correctness of information is important. So AI models can confidently say things that are completely wrong. Not wrong because it guessed it, but wrong because the model is always trying to produce a plausible sounding next token. Remember, we said LLMs are really good at predicting the next plausible text, but it doesn't know what's factually correct and what's not. And plausible and factually correct are not the same thing. So it might suggest you an impressive sounding productivity tool that doesn't even exist. Or it might cite a paper that was never written. It might explain a concept with super high confidence and get the most important details completely wrong. Actually, this is not a bug which will get patched because it's fundamentally how these models work. So people who use AI really well know this weakness, and they treat AI output like an answer from a junior employee, which is a useful starting point, but you still read it and you still validate it instead of blindly trusting its output. And finally, let's talk about a concept that's actually revolutionizing how businesses will work in the future. An LLM on its own just answers questions. But what if AI could actually do things? Not just tell you how to do those things, but go and do things independently for you. And that's where AI agents come in. The idea here is very simple. You connect your business tools like CRM, email tool like MailChimp, website, project management tools like Asana, your calendar, email, whatever, and you connect it to an AI to actually go and do stuff across these tools, to create, update, change stuff, create and send emails, or create Asana tasks and modify things in there. Now, I know for a lot of people that sounds crazy and reckless, because how can you give a tool that especially hallucinates to go and do stuff with actual tools that you use for your business or productivity? And that's where there's a fine line between being cautious and putting guardrails, but still allowing AI to connect to those tools and do stuff to increase your productivity and efficiency. So very important to understand, this is not magic. It still needs to be configured and set up properly, just like we configure any tool, and it needs to be secured so you can trust it to do things without going completely wild, just like you would with a junior employee, right? So here's the difference between generative AI like ChatGPT or Claude, Gemini, and an agentic AI, like Claude Cowork, for example, or Menace AI, you ask an LLM a question. How do I check which emails get most engagement? And it gives you instructions on how you can do it. That's Gen AI. With Agentic AI, you tell an AI agent to actually go and do this. So it connects to your MailChimp or whatever email tool you use, retrieves the emails, analyzes them, and gives you the results of engagement data. So it doesn't answer your question, it actually acts on your instructions. So an agent can create a website, can research data online, browse the web, reply to your emails, and do a bunch of stuff independently. So an agent is basically an LLM that's been given tools like ability to search the web, run code, call APIs, read files, send messages, and so on. And it decides on its own which tools to use, in which order to complete the task you asked it to do. Think of it like the difference between a consultant who advises you, which is LLM, and an employee who actually opens the laptop and does the work, which is an AI agent. Now, agents are still early. They are powerful, but they need a lot of configuration and setup at the beginning. Very important to differentiate. There are really good use cases for them, and there are really bad use cases for them. They make mistakes, they can loop, get stuck, get off the track, but the direction is very clear here because this is where future of businesses and future of work is actually heading. So that's 10 concepts, all in plain English. And as you see, you don't have to be an AI engineer to benefit from this knowledge. But understanding what's actually happening under the hood when you use these tools, when your teammates talk about these concepts, can help you feel more confident about your knowledge. I really hope this helped. Let me know what actually overwhelms you right now about understanding and learning AI so that I can cover it next. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.